And again, another shocking statistic that you've shared is when you look at the revenue mix on Hedera, right? And for folks unfamiliar kind of with this concept, 'cause I think some of this stuff is new to many people, is, Atma.io processes 99.9% of transactions on the network, but they pay a very small fee for those transactions. So they actually only represent, 80% or 85% of revenue on the network. And something that you've brought up, and I'll pull up your screen for you too, is something that you brought up that I find shocking is what happens when we change that revenue mix? If you've pointed out, if we change it 1%, it can have an absolutely drastic impact on the revenue generated by Hedera, AKA the money coming back to stakers, back to holders, back to the treasury. It's fascinating.
Yeah, this is the, this is currently being pulled from the network. So the transaction mix is 99.9% consensus service. But even this 0.1% is 8% of total revenue. And if you just do the math here, the other services are 88 times that. It'll depend on the mix of the other services, but right now it's about 87 times. The revenue is about 87 times consensus. So if you were to take
real quick, I just want to like really emphasize that for people listening, because I really want to make sure people get this, is what the data shows generated by the Hedera network is that 0.1% of the transactions sent to the network is responsible for almost 9% of revenue generated by the network. It's pretty wild.
And to see the sensitivity, if you just take this down to 98.9, so just a 1%, 100 basis point shift. Now you see that 1.1% of the transactions, that's almost half. That's now 50% of the network's revenue.
It's like a 4x or 10x or something.
Yeah, it's just, there's just a ton of sensitivity in this. In this scenario, right, I've just got 5,000 TPS in there. And that produces 30.8 million of network fees. In the original scenario, it was 17. So it's about an 80% increase in revenue just by that 1% change in the transaction mix. So yeah,
it's mind blowing.
It is. It's important. So yeah, you look for those kind of use cases that are going to come on and start to ramp up some of those other services. I don't know. Nobody has any insight into the use cases in the pipeline and what the transaction mix might look like in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. So I don't know how to model that with any degree of certainty, but you can certainly play with the sensitivity here.
That's so crazy. And just kind of staying on the screen for a minute, this is your valuation model. This is kind of what we touched on previously, was this equilibrium curve, and the red dot is kind of where we are. And how you've outlined it is basically it's, put simply, it's money in, money out. And if you have more money coming in than you have going out, you can run into problems. If you have more money going out than it's coming in, you can run into problems. So you really want that red dot, based off of the different parameters you adjust, to be riding nice and snug along that equilibrium curve, to have that longevity success of the network. And this is your valuation model. This I find is like the real kind of gem of Hashpoint.
Yeah, it's a proof of stake network, and this model is based on the binding constraint on all proof of stake networks, that the value that comes into the network, over the long term, you need to be in equilibrium, will be the value that comes out. So, it's kind of a nonprofit where, the revenues generated become the rewards paid out. And that's what this model shows. And it's interesting because, we price, the network is priced in dollars paid in HBAR. So the amount of HBAR flowing into the network is variable at any TPS, while you've got kind of a algorithmically defined staking reward APY on any any level of HBAR stake. So it's kind of a fixed HBAR out with a variable HBAR in. And so what you get is this equilibrium curve, which shows the relationship between the price of HBAR and a staking reward API, the APY that would put the network in equilibrium depending on the scenario you want to look at. So I mean, just to have fun.
Let's have some fun. I dig it. How many TPS are we going for, Brian?
I maxed it at 500. Just whatever. Let's go
500,000.
Well, you know what? Let's do something. Let's go 50.
Okay. I'd be happy with 50,000 TPS. Let's do it.
So at 50,000 TPS, and we keep the transaction mix right where it is. The network, and this is math. This is not, nobody can look at this and say, that's impossible.
Right.
The network fees would be 171 million. This I put in here because the first claim on revenue should be the operating expenses, that
right.
go to account 98.
How much does it cost to run the network?
Yeah, before you can even allocate to rewards. But this I said, I'm going to leave this at 0 and I'll explain why in a second.
Okay.
So you've got 171 million now net available for rewards. The current allocation is 10% goes to the account 800. So that's why I set this to 0, because this kind of reflects the current parameters.
Gotcha.
10% of revenue goes to account 800. So that's what this shows. But you can play with this, if you want to make an assumption that it gets 50-50 divided between 800 and 801 for staking rewards. But then on the way out, you've got the big variable is the amount of HBAR staked for rewards. Set for the network is currently 6.774 billion. These are, again, pulling real numbers from the network.
Right.
But if you set that at 7 billion, what you've got is at the current APY, the fair value equilibrium in this, the price of HBAR would have to rise to $1.19 for the amount of HBAR flowing into the network to equal the amount of HBAR flowing out of the network.
Gotcha.
And anywhere on this curve, you're in equilibrium. Right. So if the staking reward, went up to, 0.51, then the equilibrium price is 48 cents. So it's that trade-off between the price of HBAR, which influences a variable amount of HBAR flowing into the network, against the staking APY, which is the determinant for the amount of HBAR flowing out. So it's a simple. I mean, if you sit with it for a little bit, I mean, it seems screwy for a little bit, but if you actually sit with it, it makes sense. And just do the math. I mean, start with the HBAR price times TPS is your US dollars flowing into the network, and then you've got HBAR stake times APY is your flowing out, and you'll see that you've got to ultimately in the long run be in equilibrium, and anywhere on this curve that condition is satisfied. But if the market is going to be at 0.2% staking APY, then the equilibrium price of HBAR is $1.22.
Right.
And there's a couple of points. There's a couple of points here. People that say just randomly HBAR can never get to, and they pick a dollar price. That's phony and false. And people that say that there is a market cap constraint on the price of HBAR, it's also phony, because because you'd be arguing that some nominal market cap is more important than the real yield you could get from the network. And I'm going to write something up on that. There's a blog on here where I get to write my thoughts and opinions, and something I enjoy. But I'm going to add something on that topic. But that's essentially the valuation model.
That's amazing.
And it's interactive, so anyone can play with it and make their own assumptions and scenarios and get themselves excited.